it looks like there won't be a nuclear agreement between the United States and Iran. Iran is ready to reject the United States' proposal to end the years-long nuclear dispute. An Iranian diplomat said this on Monday, calling it doomed to fail, since the nuclear agreement does not serve Tehran's interests and does not soften Washington's position on the issue of uranium enrichment. This is where things get really interesting, as this seems to be exactly the kind of response we should have expected from Iran. Tehran was merely delaying. And then suddenly the International Atomic Energy Agency, that very International Atomic Energy Agency, basically caught Iran red-handed. Iran sharply increased the amount of enriched uranium it possesses. This is stated in the International Atomic Energy Agency report, which was published on Saturday among member states as part of preparations for the agency's June board meeting. And this report has already been shared with the United States of America, and it became obvious that Iran was stalling for time and during this period was enriching uranium in simply enormous quantities. My name is Alexei Pichi. Today is June 2nd on the calendar. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and write your comment. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as soon as it comes in. So Iran is actually preparing a public refusal to Washington to sign a new nuclear deal. As a high-ranking diplomat close to Iran's negotiating team told the agency, Iran is preparing a negative response to the United States proposal, which will be interpreted as a rejection of the United States offer. The United States proposal for a new nuclear deal was presented to Iran on Saturday by Oman's Foreign Minister Saeed Badr al-Busaidi, who was visiting Tehran and acted as a mediator in the negotiations between Tehran and Washington. After 5 rounds of negotiations between Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and President Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, some obstacles still remain. Among them is Iran's refusal to comply with the United States' demand to stop uranium enrichment and to refuse to export all of its stockpile of highly enriched uranium abroad, which could be used as possible material for making a nuclear bomb. Tehran claims that it wants to develop nuclear technology for peaceful purposes and has long denied accusations by Western powers of attempting to develop nuclear weapons. Well, as the Iranian diplomat stated, quote in this sentence, the United States' position on enrichment on Iranian territory remains unchanged and there is no clear explanation regarding the lifting of sanctions. Araghchi stated that Tehran will officially respond to the United States proposal soon, while the United States State Department has so far declined to comment. Tehran is demanding the immediate lifting of all restrictions imposed by the United States that are harming its oil-based economy, but the United States says that sanctions related to the nuclear program should be lifted gradually. Dozens of institutions vital to Iran's economy, including its central bank and national oil company, have been blacklisted since 2018, according to Washington, for supporting terrorism or the proliferation of weapons. Trump's resumption of maximum pressure on Tehran after his return to the White House in January included tightening sanctions and threats to bomb Iran if negotiations did not lead to an agreement. Let me remind you, during his first presidential term in 2018, Trump tore up Tehran's 2015 nuclear pact with 6 powers and reimposed sanctions that paralyzed Iran's economy. Iran responded by escalating uranium enrichment far beyond the limits set in the nuclear agreement. According to the agreement, until 2018, Iran limited its sensitive nuclear work in exchange for the lifting of economic sanctions by the United States, the European Union, and the United Nations. And now an Iranian diplomat reports that the assessment of the Iranian Committee on Nuclear Negotiations, led by Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is that the United States proposal is completely one-sided and cannot serve the interests of Iran. Therefore, the diplomat states, Tehran considers this proposal unrealistic and believes that it is a one-sided attempt to impose a bad deal on Iran through excessive demands. The stakes are really high for both sides right now. Trump wants to limit Tehran's potential to produce nuclear weapons, which could provoke a regional nuclear arms race and possibly threaten Israel. But the so-called spiritual establishment of Iran, for its part, wants to get rid of the devastating sanctions. Iran says it is ready to accept some restrictions on enrichment, but it needs reliable guarantees that Washington will not abandon a future nuclear agreement. But Tehran does not want to completely give up uranium enrichment. And just last week, two Iranian officials said that Iran might suspend uranium enrichment if the United States unfreezes frozen Iranian assets. And they recognize Tehran's right to process uranium for civilian purposes as part of a political deal that could lead to a broader nuclear agreement. So it's a hint that if you lift the sanctions on us, we'll promise to suspend uranium enrichment. It's like saying we won't destroy all the centrifuges, we'll just pause them. Israel, the main enemy of Iran, which sees Iran's nuclear program as an existential threat, has repeatedly threatened to bomb the Islamic Republic's nuclear facilities to prevent Tehran from obtaining nuclear weapons. And here is Araghchi at a joint press conference with his Egyptian counterpart in Cairo this week, stating the following: "I don't think Israel will make such a mistake as attacking Iran." Meanwhile, Tehran's regional influence has weakened due to military setbacks suffered by its forces and the forces of its allies. From the so-called Shia axis of resistance, which includes Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and the so-called militias in Iraq. And in April, the Minister of Defense of Saudi Arabia directly told Iranian officials that they should take Donald Trump's proposal for a new deal seriously in order to avoid the risk of a direct war with Israel. But here, as it turned out, the International Atomic Energy Agency finally did its job. And in fact, the International Atomic Energy Agency prepared a damning report on Iran's nuclear program. In particular, as stated in the report of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran has sharply increased the amount of enriched uranium it possesses. Since the last International Atomic Energy Agency assessment, as of February, Iran has produced almost 136 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60%. And in order to obtain nuclear weapon fuel, it needs to be enriched up to 90%. If you think that's a big gap, once it crosses the 60% threshold, it doesn't take that long to enrich it up to 90%. Iran has also reported total uranium reserves of about 410 kilograms. And now, United States officials say that Iran may need less than 2 weeks to turn this highly enriched uranium into enough 90% weapons-grade fissile material for a nuclear weapon. Next, I'll quote Rafael Grossi, the International Atomic Energy Agency Director General. Although the report does not contain a monthly breakdown, it did not provide any evidence that Iran has slowed the accumulation of 60% enriched material since the start of negotiations with the United States on April 12th. A non-nuclear state that produces such nuclear material causes serious concern. And this news about the International Atomic Energy Agency assessment appeared after United States President Donald Trump stated that the United States and Iran are close to an agreement on the nuclear deal, negotiations on which they began in April. According to Trump, if no agreement is reached, the United States will use force to eliminate Iran's nuclear program. Well, as Trump said last Friday, they don't want to be bombed, so they're more likely to reach an agreement, and I think this could happen in the near future. He said this Friday. And now on Monday, Iranian diplomats say they will likely reject the deal as it doesn't suit them. Moreover, literally a day after Donald Trump's confident statement that the Iranians would definitely sign an agreement with him because they don't want to be bombed, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that he received elements of the quote through his colleague in Oman. The United States proposals, which must be responded to in accordance with the principles, national interests, and rights of the Iranian people. But in fact, a little later in a separate statement, that same Araghchi said that Iran will not comply with the United States' demands for a complete halt to uranium enrichment. Quote, "Regardless of whether we need enrichment or not, but we are doing it. It's unacceptable for some to impose restrictions on us just because they consider themselves powerful." Meanwhile, Israel has also responded to the International Atomic Energy Agency's actions, and the office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also published a statement after the International Atomic Energy Agency report, saying that it, quote, "presents a stark picture that serves as a clear warning sign." Despite countless warnings from the international community, Iran is fully determined to complete its nuclear weapons program. The report decisively confirms what Israel has been saying for years: the goal of Iran's nuclear program is absolutely not peaceful. And so, answering the question of whether there is a way to bridge the gap between the United States and Iran on the enrichment issue, International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Grossi said that if there is a willingness to reach an agreement, I think you can find a way. He didn't add anything else. That's it. This was in a separate report for the Board of Governors to consider on Saturday. The International Atomic Energy Agency concluded that more than 2 decades ago, Iran was engaged in secret activities related to nuclear weapons, involving undeclared nuclear material at 3 locations within Iran. It is likely now reviving that same program. This report provides a detailed description of Iran's ongoing refusal to answer the International Atomic Energy Agency's questions regarding the locations, materials, and activities at these nuclear sites. Therefore, it's clear that Iran has been stalling again for a while. Let me remind you, these negotiations have been dragging on since the Biden administration. They were ongoing, and now under Trump, they're happening again. Trump says that we're just about to sign, just a little bit more. Meanwhile, Iran persists in enriching uranium, which can rapidly be converted into nuclear weapons. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like.